Greetings, fellow citizens of the vast Obsidian community. Welcome to another video in the Obsidian for Noobs video series, featuring tutorials, tips, and tools for new users of the Obsidian personal knowledge management software. This video covers a handy tip for creating multi-column text in Obsidian. By default, text that is entered into a note in Obsidian will span the full readable line length of the note. But there are situations in which you might want a note's text to be formatted into parallel columns. Multi-column text is useful for, among other things, making a note appear like a newspaper or magazine article, showing comments in a margin alongside a body of text, making side-by-side comparisons. Such a format is referred to as multi-column layout, or multi-col layout for short. The trick to accomplish multi-column text in Obsidian is to use a table with invisible borders. Here are a couple of examples of what I'm talking about. The first example shows 3-column text in an Obsidian note, appearing very much like an article in a newspaper or magazine. This text is actually contained within a 3-column table whose borders have been hidden. In this second example, we see a situation involving Marginalia, which is a fancy way of saying marginal notes. In other words, we have the main body of text, the larger section on the left, with corresponding marginal notes appearing in the thinner section on the right. This is accomplished by creating a 2-column table with a wider first column and a narrower second column, and again, with hidden borders. Creating tables in Obsidian is easy enough, but the big questions are, first, how do you hide the table's borders? And second, how do you set the column width of a table? The answer to both these questions is to use CSS Snippets. I've already made videos that cover the basics of creating tables in Obsidian and the basics of creating CSS Snippets for use in Obsidian, so I won't repeat that material again here. The titles of those videos appear now on your screen, and you can find both videos on my YouTube channel. If you're new to these topics, or if you need a refresher, then please give those videos a look. Please note that the CSS code that I will show in this video is available for copying at my website on the About and Downloads page. And I'll put the link to the website in the video description. Okay, I'm back in my vault with the example of the 3-column text. This text actually appears in a table with 3 cells. But as I mentioned earlier, the borders of the table are hidden. And that was accomplished using a CSS snippet. I'm going to open the Notes YAML properties now. And you see that in the CSS classes section, I'm referencing a CSS class entitled table-borderless. And I'll show you the code for that CSS snippet in a moment. That's the CSS class that's affecting this table and resulting in hiding its borders. Again, for details about CSS snippets, refer to my video that I mentioned earlier. Just to mention briefly now, you have 2 options when you use CSS snippets. You can create a CSS snippet that has global impact on your vault, which means the code in that snippet will affect the entirety of your vault. The other option is to use a CSS class, which is what I'm using here. In this case, it only affects the note in which it is referenced. And I purposely did that because I did not want the borders for all my tables throughout this entire vault to be hidden. I only wanted the borders hidden in the particular notes where I wanted that effect. So this is the CSS class that's resulting in the hiding of the borders of this table. Let me go to another note. And I'll create a table here using the Notes right-click menu, Insert, Table. And you can see that the borders of this table are visible. Again, if I had put that borderless code in a global-wide CSS snippet, then every single table in this vault would have its borders hidden. And I didn't want that, so I use a CSS class instead. Let me activate that CSS class in this note and show you how it causes the border for the table to disappear. I'm going to open the Notes YAML properties by typing 3 hyphens directly under the note's title. I'm going to select CSS classes, and then I'm going to select the class that hides the borders, which in this case is table borderless. And when I do, you see that that table immediately disappears. Now the table is not gone, only its borders are hidden. The table is still there. If I delete the CSS class, you'll see the table's borders reappear. So that's how this CSS class works. Let me go back to my 3-column table. This is the CSS code that hides the borders of this table. And let me go through each part. What we do in CSS is we reference a variable that denotes a particular feature in Obsidian, and we assign a value to that variable. Now, Obsidian breaks up the various components of a table into different parts, so you can't erase the entire border of the table all at once. The table is referenced in pieces using CSS variables. So you can see the table border width, column first border width, column last border width, and so forth and so on. And the way you make them invisible is to set their width to 0 pixels. If I were to change the value in one of these, the pixel value in one of these in the actual code and resave it, that particular portion of the table would reappear. And all of these pieces together constitute the entire table. I kind of had to do this by trial and error. I found the variables on Obsidian's help page, and I'll put a link to that as well. And then I experimented with each one until I was able to get the border for the entire table to disappear. Notice also that the last entry in the code sets the table's maximum column width to 600 pixels. I did that because the length of a full node in Obsidian is about 700 pixels. And I wanted to prevent any column in the table from exceeding the node's full width. So I limited it to 600 pixels. That doesn't have to be exact, by the way, and you can experiment with different values. In another bit of code that I'm going to show you in a moment, I did have to set the width of the columns in the table to precise values. And I'll explain that when I show that code in a moment. Let me deactivate this snippet in the YAML properties, and you'll see the borders of this table appear. This is the actual table. But if I add that snippet again, the borders of the table are gone, and I get the effect of multi-column text. If I go into Settings and Appearance and scroll down to CSS Snippets and find the particular snippet that controls that, and I believe it's this one here, I'm going to turn it off in Settings, and you'll also see the table's borders reappear. So that snippet is off, and the table's borders are back. The CSS class is still shown here, but I've turned off the snippet that this class appears in. By the way, that snippet has 2 classes, one for this example for the 3-column table, and another CSS class for another example I'm going to show you in a moment. So by me turning off that snippet, I'm deactivating this particular class. I'll go back into Settings, and in Appearance, I'll go back to Snippets, and I'll turn on that CSS snippet, and the borders are gone. The other example I want to show you is what I mentioned earlier, which is the possibility of including comments in the margin of a document. So what I've done here is I've created a 2-column table with the left column being much wider than the right column, with the idea that the text in the left column is the actual body of the text of interest, and the text in the right column are comments on the text here. Right? This is marginalia, or marginal comments on text. And again, the illusion for this was created by creating a 2-column table, specifically mentioning the column width for each one so that we got the left column wider than the right column, and then using CSS to hide the borders. Here I'm referencing 2 CSS classes in the YAML properties. This was the one that I used in the 3-column example. That's the CSS class that hides the borders. And this class sets the column size for the table. In this particular example, I set the left column size to 500 pixels and the right column size to 200 pixels. Remember, the full length across a note in Obsidian is about 700 pixels. Here's the code for those CSS classes. This is exactly the one you saw before, right? Borderless table CSS class. This simply hides the borders of a table. This is the new code to control the widths of the columns. The first column I've set to 500 pixels. That's the wide column where the body of the text is. and the right-hand column I set to 200 pixels, which is where the marginalia or the marginal comments go. By the way, the code for this first CSS class I created myself. This one was beyond my pay grade, so I had to look it up. I did some searches on Google, and I found CSS code to set column widths. So this was really copied and adapted to my use case over here. I'm going to go into settings and turn off that CSS snippet again so you can see the table as it looks with its borders. There's the table. Now notice this table involves several rows. I wanted the comments to align with the text that they correspond to. And I had to do that by creating separate rows in the table. If we go back to the 3-column table, it was just one single table. But for the 2-column table, I needed a correspondence here. And if I did it all in a single row 2-column table, then the comments for the various sections would not match up. So let me just copy some of this text, and I'll put it in this cell of the table down here, and then I'll type a new comment. And that's how you could keep going. You can keep adding rows to the table, keep putting in the text of the table and the associated comments. Whoops. And then if I go in settings and reactivate that snippet, we've eliminated the borders of the table, and it looks like I have marginal notes with my text. So there you have it, a simple and easy trick to enable the use of multi-column text in your Obsidian notes. Tables are, in my opinion, one of Obsidian's most powerful and versatile features. Getting creative with tables can lead to some really interesting ideas, and adding CSS to the mix expands those possibilities even further. Okay, fellow Obsidizens, that's all I have for now. I'll see you in the next video. Happy note-taking.